even live, even live on a live stream. Sometimes we forget to unmute. Hello, everybody. Hello, hello. Thank you all for joining us today for our discussion on the many faces of Latinx and Hispanic leadership. We are super, super excited. I'm Tanya Blackwood, and I'm your host for today's panel. Now, in addition to my role as talent acquisition manager on the HR team here at the Center for Creative Leadership, I'm also a very proud member of CCL's Hispanic Latinx Employee Resource Group. That's a mouthful, right? In a second, I'm going to ask them, each of our three panelists that you see, their beautiful faces here with me, to introduce themselves. But first, let me just frame things a little bit for you. You know, we're having this conversation and we're going to cover a few areas because this is a passionate topic for us. And being able to have a safe place to discuss it and bring these topics forward it's a unique opportunity. We are celebrating Hispanic Heritage Month. And with that being said, we want to address some very important questions that sometimes don't get spoken about in a large forum. So we're going to challenge your perspectives on different ideals that are important to the Latin community. And we also have some projects and different things we're working on. I want to share with you at the end to let you know what we're doing to contribute to the Hispanic Heritage Month, right? We have, well, I won't give it away. I'll wait a little bit and I'll share it at the end. So make sure that you stay with us. This is going to be some good conversation. I promise you that. I think what we'll probably do is kick off and start introducing ourselves, right? Let's talk to Gonzalo. Gonzalo, tell us why you're here, who you are, everything.
Hola, hola, hola. Buenas tardes a todos. Hello and good afternoon. For me, I know that for many of you probably is a good morning or maybe good evening. I don't know. I am saying buenas tardes because I'm joining from Spain today, from where I am originally from and from where I have lived all my life, and I have finished my university degrees in psychology there. Um, Actually, I don't have as much diversity in my background as I could wish, but that made me feel to wonder how much I could fit into our ERG and maybe into this panel. But I happen to today join or log in from Valencia, but I usually live in Berlin, in Germany. And I have lived there for 10 years. And living abroad has made me to develop a clearer than ever identity as part of this community, I would say. I, there in Berlin, frequently relate to Hispanic and Latinx people in behaviors, in habits, in cultural references, in good food, of course. And I navigate Germany and Europe, a very conglomerated Europe, as a Hispanic slash Latinx person. And back to why here and from CCL, I do also work at CCL as a client implementation manager, focusing mainly in that region clients. And I remotely co-lead our beautiful and global LGBTQ plus ERG. So nice to meet you all.
Thank you so much, Gonzalo, and welcome. I know we're going to have some great dialogue today. I want to introduce you all to, we affectionately call her Liz. But Liz, if you can introduce yourself to everyone.
Hola, buenos días from Minneapolis, Minnesota. My name is Elizabeth or Liz Brandes Fry, and I've been at the Center for Creative Leadership for almost a year and a half now. My role is an evaluation associate in our societal impact group, so I support evaluation for our social sector programs, in particular, especially in higher education, since that's my background as a former college professor. And I'm also one of the 3 co-leaders of our Hispanic Latinx Employee Resource Group at CCL, together with 2 other colleagues, Hernan Torres and Marcia Dawkins. I was born and raised in Mexico City in a bilingual and bicultural household. My dad originally grew up in the US, in different places in the Midwest, and my mother grew up in Mexico, near Mexico City. And I came to the United States for college, for undergrad first, then I stayed for grad school, and then I've stayed here to work and have lived in various places. Also throughout the Midwest, I was in Ohio and in Illinois, Indiana, and now Minnesota. My family is very global. So I'm, as I said, in Minneapolis. My parents are still in Mexico City. My sister now lives in Amsterdam. So we're a very multicultural family. There's a lot of diversity, and we really enjoy celebrating our multiple cultures together. So thank you, everyone. Happy to be here.
Thank you so much, Liz. And Amy, please do us the honor of sharing.
Hi, everybody, or as everyone was saying, buenos dias a todos. My name is Amy Stair. I'm an instructional designer here at the Center for Creative Leadership. I've been here for almost 2 years. I'm maybe not the average person you would see on this panel. I grew up in Nevada. I come from a traditional, like, white mainstream American culture family, but I moved to Mexico 11 years ago, and I married a Mexican man 7 years ago. We live here in Guadalajara and just have a normal Mexican life, I would say. And so I think what's really exciting for me being a part of this panel is I feel like this culture of the Latinx Hispanic culture, as I've experienced also in Mexico, it's just such an open place. Even though this isn't a culture that I was born into, I feel like it's a culture that's really adopted me into it and has really accepted me. And I'm just really thankful for that and really thankful to be here.
Thank you so much, Amy. I just love the diversity that's represented on the panel. And I know you're probably wondering how I got here too. I haven't shared anything with you, right? So let me just do that. I am Brooklyn born of two amazing Panamanian parents who found their way to the United States many, many years ago by way of Jamaica and Spain, Barcelona to be specific. And I have, I guess, also a unique perspective, as my colleagues do, of our individual experience as a Latina, as an Afro-Latina. How I look at the world is sometimes very different from others, and we all can say that in our own perspective. So I am so excited to hear the dialogue that's going to come out of such a unique group. And, as you all know, our discussion today, it centers around diversity in our communities and the roles that these differences play when it comes to the big L word, leadership, right? Now, as we kick things off, I'd love to know if we have any other members in the audience that identify as Latinx or Hispanic and who are currently in leadership roles. I want you to, put your hand up. Let us know where you are. Share in the chat. And you know what? Regardless of your background, take a minute to let us know where some of you've already done that. You're letting us know you're from Texas and all over the place. And we're so happy to see you. There's Richmond in the house, Houston, Venezuela. Oh, come on, guys. I love this. I absolutely love this. Now, let's move right into our discussion because I want to get to the meat of this, right? As Latinx Hispanic people, there's a richness that we have in our differences as well as our shared cultures, things that we have that are aligned. So I would love to hear from our panelists on how you feel that we can foster a greater understanding and appreciation for the diversity within the Hispanic and Latinx community, within our leadership roles. What do you think about that? And you know what, Gonzalo, are you okay to start for us?
Sure, why not? I would go in any degree of a leadership role, whatever you are at your career, whatever you are in life. I would say celebrate it. I think that is the first and last thing I will be saying, because what I want to convey is like a circle. celebrate your identities, those that you have this month. Celebrate this one. Celebrating your identity takes you to share it. Celebrating must be something social that you do socially, and by sharing it, you do communicate to others, and then you get feedback, and then you get conflicts, and then you start wondering and reflecting, and curiosity grows, and team building grows in terms of leadership, like in a nerdy kind of answer. But this building ways can take you to learn from others, and others to learn from you. I think that if you do not celebrate and share, it's impossible that we can make others understand how colorful this community is, how different it is within itself, how make people understand what the stereotypes can hurt us the most, how in the community there are 10, at least 10 or more shades, colors of skin, and it is very difficult to make someone understand why some Latinx people have the mate all the time in their hands, like 90% of the time, or why our abuelitas are the best of history. That's a fact, and you need to understand it.
That's right. Gonzalo, I love your answer. I love it. I love it because celebrating it encourages dialogue, and it makes you approachable, and it makes other people feel open to share who they are. You're so right. And if you're closed in that way, then you'll never have an understanding of how other people are. And it's contagious, just like your energy is. So thank you for that. That was so on point. Celebrate. It's the perfect way to start this. So Liz, talk to us. What do you feel about that question? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so I love that we're talking about diversity, because even growing up in Mexico, my family would travel around, the country and sample like the different foods, like Oaxaca, Puebla. There's so much diversity, even just within a country itself. There's a lot of diversity, and when we consider other Latin American regions, we consider Puerto Rico, Iberian Peninsula, the diversity just multiplies, and there's just so much richness in culture that's there. And I think as leaders, it's important for us to foster spaces where, as we've been saying, like people can share who they are, feel comfortable sharing their identities, and approach learning from each other with a genuine curiosity. As an evaluator, I'm really big on curiosity. So I'm a Latina, but I'm also a lot more. There are many identities that we bring to the table. We are complex people. Each of us is unique, and it's important for our colleagues to get to know us as a whole person, as a whole unique person. And even when I just consider the Latina aspect of my identity, that's complex, because growing up, I spent my childhood in Mexico, but also with the U.S. culture from my father, and then now living in the U.S. As a Mexican living in the U.S., sometimes I have this feeling of in between. We have a saying in Spanish that is ni de aquí ni de allá, so like neither from here nor from there. So for example, when I moved to the US for college, I had kind of a slight accent when I spoke English. It wasn't very strong, but people told me, "Oh, where are you from?" And I would say, I would tell them I was from Mexico. And then when I come back to visit Mexico, people like in the mercados, they'll ask me, do you live in the US? Because they can tell, like, I guess I have a slight accent that I wasn't even aware of. So this kind of in between, like ni de aquí ni de allá, it can be challenging, because sometimes I feel like I don't fit in fully, but at the same time I do sort of fit in multiple places. So I think it's actually it's enriching, and that I can understand multiple perspectives. And another thing I'll add too is that when other people share about their own cultures and traditions, I think that invites me and encourages me to share about my own cultures as well. So for example, when people talk about their winter holiday traditions and kind of share recipes with each other, that invites me to share traditions I grew up with in Mexico. And I know that as an employee resource group, the Latinx Hispanic ERG, we shared our favorite winter and holiday foods in our January meeting, and that was really fun. So we have a lot that we can learn from each other.
I so appreciate that, Liz, and you're right on point. I think that this is a great question to kick us off, because like Warda's in the comments And the first thing she put in there is, I'm here to learn. I'm Somali Norwegian. And I think as a leader, you know, if you grasp your people, you get an understanding of your people. If you're open to tell them who you are and your fabric and where you come from as a leader, they're open to share the same. And so everybody comes together with this learning to understand each other. You can't lead people if you don't understand them. And guess what? They remember that you care before they remember anything you told them to do, right? So this is so important. So thank you so much for sharing that. We have folks, I'm just going to call this out for a quick second because it's blowing my mind. We have folks that are from Dubai, Brussels, Madrid, Sri Lanka, California. I mean, they're everywhere. Beacon, New York, Richmond, Virginia. Just we have such an awesome spread of folks. It is amazing to see that. Don't you guys agree? It's so awesome. So, you know, the second question that I have, because your insight's so great, I think, you know, showcasing the culture like this and how it relates to leadership and how you interact with your people is really, you know, why we're here today. We have to embrace those differences. So here's my next question. What has helped each of you feel a sense of connection in the workplace as a Latinx, Hispanic leader in your organization, right? And feel free to chime in the chat too, guys. So we want to share this and maybe folks can walk away with some things that they can do. Now, are these things organizations can do? Other organizations besides, we're coming from CCL, right? The Center for Creative Leadership. But talk to me about that. What has helped each of you feel a sense of connection in the workplace as a Latinx Hispanic leader? Amy, what do you think? What has helped you?
Yeah, I think kind of relating back to what Liz was saying a minute ago about ni de aquí ni de allá. I think as an immigrant myself, I think everybody who's had immigration in their past can relate to that feeling that you don't really belong in any one space, that you're constantly changing and that the culture around you is changing you as well. And so when I came to CCL, I definitely experienced that. I hadn't worked for an American company for many, many, many years. And so even though I was born in the United States, I felt a bit of culture shock. And something that I think really helped me that CCL has done that has just, I've loved is the people on this panel, our ERG, the employee resource group that we have that's celebrating Latinx and Hispanic culture. It's really just an open place. When I heard about it, I thought, oh, I'm not actually, you know, I wasn't born into this community. I wouldn't identify as a traditional Latina, although I feel like that's become a part of my identity because of the environment I've lived in most of my adult life. And so having this employee resource group where we get together and we talk and we share, and we really are sharing a lot of the diversity within the culture. You know, when kind of like what Gonzalo was talking about at the beginning was we, in this community, we have people all the way from the very southern tip of Argentina to the very northernmost area of Mexico into the Iberian Peninsula. And it's so diverse. It's Spanish and Portuguese and so many indigenous languages. It's so immense. And so having a place where we can all gather and share our differences, but in a way that's celebrating our differences, I think that that's something really special about this community, is because of the way that the history of colonialism throughout the world and the way it played out in Latin America is it was truly a blending of people. Whereas in the United States, there's a lot of separation. We have in our history a lot of this separate but equal kind of concept. In Latin America specifically, I would argue that it didn't play out like that. people came together and they created family groups together. And so it's just really built into the culture of the Latin Hispanic people. And it's something really beautiful. And so if a company can create a safe space that allows those people to come together, I think is one of the most important things. And then something else that I think is really awesome about this group, this ERG, is that it's not closed off only to people who identify as Latinx and Hispanic. It's open to anyone. And so I've been a part of meetings where people from all diverse backgrounds who don't have this identity, they come and share also. And so they're able to gain an appreciation of this group of people and their culture because our ERG is open to people. So that's what I think having that space is one of the most important things that a company can do to foster an appreciation.
Thank you so much, Amy. I wanted to ask you to weigh in on the last question because you have a very unique perspective from what you bring to the panel. Can you talk a little bit about the appreciation? I know you had shared something with me when you were preparing. Talk to me about the appreciation for diversity within the community as it pertains to a leadership role itself.
Absolutely. So I was telling Tanya before this panel today that I was speaking to my husband and my husband's family who are Mexican, born, live in Mexico, how they would answer that question. And several of them said, before I would want to be identified in my company as Latino, I would want to be recognized for me. Like, I want you to see me as Hector Chavez. Like, I am a person and I have value in and of myself. I want you to understand who I am. And being Latino is a part of who I am, but it's not the only thing that I represent. And so being seen as more than just my heritage, my ethnicity, that was really important to them, that they be seen for who they are. And so having people recognize, that they're just, it goes far beyond the color of your skin or your place of origin. Your value as a person is far greater than that, and that only represents a piece of who you are. So having people interact with them in meaningful ways to get to know them, people who are open and asking really genuine questions to get to know them, it was a really important component of that.
Thank you, Amy. I think, that kind of speaks to Cristina Villa's comment that she made. Sometimes it's annoying because people only see that part of you, and that's just that small piece of who you are. I think Liz said that as well. I'm more than just a Latina. There's more to me. So, Cristina, I hope that, you hear us on that because, we see you on that. Gonzalo, talk to us and I'll repeat that. The question we were dealing with earlier, is what's helped you get a sense of connection in your workplace?
And I will repeat a little bit the answer as well. I can say it more informally. And I would say in Spanish, la cabra tira pa'l monte, which is kind of the goat is drawn to the hills. And what I mean by this is that it is not strange to see Spanish-speaking people gathering with more frequency, maybe, or easiness than maybe other communities. And I think the channel for me has been the language, of course, but I admit that I often have met a lot of congenial people in the community. And when times get tougher, I find Latinx communities always bringing a very powerful connection. In other words, what I say is do this, but do this formally in terms of leadership, and get yourself very nice, like ours, Hispanic Latinx ERG. These ERGs are not only good to create connection and engagement for employees, they create belonging, and also they are very valuable for experiences of distress or need for cultural celebration. And it provides, for me, I can tell about my experience with my other ERG as well, it creates opportunity in which, as part of a community, one can make things happen, and one can channel the voices of the community, and so leading with more equality, with more diversity, with more inclusion.
That's great. We're getting some questions about, some of the elements of Latina leadership. And I think you covered some of those, along with the charisma and our ability to blend and meld. We're a community leadership style that we have, I believe. If I'm speaking out of turn, let me know. But I think outside of the general elements of leadership, the ability to move a community to find common ground and take care of each other are some classic elements of the Latino leadership style. But let's keep going. Let's talk. Liz, why don't you share with us some of your thoughts about the same question?
Yeah, so I just wanted to reiterate what my colleagues have said about employee resource groups in creating a sense of inclusion and belonging. So our Latinx Hispanic ERG is a place where we can come together, be ourselves, feel connected to each other, even though we're scattered across the globe. And I think just in general, organizations providing space to get to know colleagues on a personal level and connect on things, even if it doesn't necessarily have to do with work, that's important and helping me kind of feel more like myself in the workplace. So my team, shout out to my team. We are awesome at building time for personal connection during meetings. We check in on each other. I'm also part of a social connections committee for our broader societal impact group, where we plan activities to connect and socialize. And these spaces are important, especially me being fully remote. Sometimes it's hard to feel connected because I can't just go to the cafeteria and talk to people at lunch. It's important to kind of be intentional about building those spaces to build community. And I think just connection is so important because even though it takes time, I think it's worth it because I feel like when employees feel connected, they feel like they belong somewhere, they're happier at the organization. And I think they're more likely to stay and grow there. So even though, it takes extra time, for me personally, at least, I think that taking the time to connect with my colleagues ultimately leads me to do my work better and collaborate better with other people.
You're so on point with that. Thanks, Liz. Thank you guys all for your comments. At CCL, we work really hard to make sure that everybody feels included, and that they feel included as who they are, not as anybody outside of that. They have a sense of belonging at work. They feel safe. So, if you're following us on social media, you'll probably have seen or heard of us talking about topics like belonging, well-being, compassion. I think all of these come into play, when you're shaping a leader's experience, when you're raising up a leader to start to build connections at work, right? I did want to speak to one question that came from our audience, guys. I hope you don't mind me detouring just for a minute, but they wanted to know from you guys, what advice do you have for people that don't have an ERG? Like this one that we are blessed to have at our job, especially if there aren't enough members of the community to start the group. What do you recommend that they do? Anyone can step forward and share. What are your thoughts?
I think one of the important things is advocating for one, first of all. If you have that desire to have an ERG in your workspace, to advocate to get one, set one up yourself. And if you don't have members of your community in your workspace, I think you could still create one and have it be a place where allies can come together to learn from you. Even if you're a very small group of people that share that identity, making it an open space where you're celebrating it, and you're sharing your culture so that others can come and experience it and celebrate it with you. I think part of our identity is we think of it as it's ours, we own it, but I think it becomes really meaningful. Like what Gonzalo was saying at the beginning is when you share it and when you celebrate it with other people is when it really becomes meaningful.
Thank you, Amy. Anybody else have any thoughts on that?
I wanted
Yeah.
to. Oh, sorry. Go
Okay.
ahead, Liz.
I was just going to say that our employee resource group, it's not just members from our Latinx Hispanic community, but we're also open to allies because we are a small group, just as we are. And so, so like Amy said, kind of advocating for a group, but also consider maybe including allies as part of the group too, so they can you can all learn from each other.
Great. Go ahead, Gonzalo.
Just wanted to say, very well said, both of you. I would add to get yourself a good sponsor. That is an important element to navigate towards a better exposure of your ERG and to fulfill any objectives, any goals that you might want.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you, guys. I appreciate you taking that detour with me. That popped out as a question. And, you know, we want to give people some direction when they leave here. They can maybe start down that road of making it happen, because I know personally it's provided both a fun, but also a safe space to land, having that employee resource group at the Center for Creative Leadership. And it's definitely something that you want to mirror, match, or recreate. So we wish you luck in pursuing that if you don't have it in place now. But we were talking about well-being before I took that little left turn, and I would love to hear your perspectives on how we can manage the challenges that come from being, because, hey, this road is not an easy road, right? From being a Latinx Hispanic leader, you know, while preserving our own well-being. We are hard workers, if you believe all the stereotypes, which you shouldn't, but we are hard workers, right? We'll get the job done. And sometimes it's at sacrifice of our own well-being. So, Liz, do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so I think for me, it's really important to build a network of support. So seeking support from mentors, from sponsors, from peers who can understand challenges that come with being a Latinx Hispanic leader and give advice and share their experiences. For me, part of this network of support are my two awesome co-leads of the Latinx Hispanic ERG, as well as the whole ERG in general. And this support can also come from other networks outside of work too, other professional networks, or other family or friends. And also I wanted to emphasize, like Tanya said, we need to take care of our well-being as well, just the importance of that. To that end, I actually have a quote from one of my co-leads of the ERG, Marcia Dawkins. In a previous LinkedIn Live, she shared a saying from her Cuban grandmother that was in Spanish: cambiar donde estás, sí. Cambiar quién eres, no. And the closest translation that Marcia shared in English is a quote from the CEO of Essence, which is, if you can't be who you are, where you are, you change where you are, not who you are. So for me, it's the environment is really important for our well-being, because it's easy to just want to assimilate. We just want to fit in to a dominant culture. But I think in order for, to take care of my own well-being, at least, I think it's important to be in an environment where I can be who I am. So yeah, that's my answer.
Yo, I love that, Liz. I love that. Authenticity is really the key, right? And you need to be someplace where you can be who you are. Amy, what are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, I really love what you were saying, Liz. I think a lot of the story of so many people in this community is a story of immigration and trying to fit into a dominant culture. And I think that can really devalue your culture, and it's also exhausting. When you're constantly trying to change who you are, how you present yourself, it's just exhausting. And then not to mention the amount of work that's involved in your life and just how hard this community works. And so something that was shared that I think it was Mercy was saying is she really wants us to share that this community needs rest. We all need rest, but when you're working in these cultural environments, really making that a focus for yourself. And also, like what Liz was saying, was finding community. I think that this is one of the most beautiful things, in my own personal opinion, with this community is it's so open, it's so warm and inviting. And so because building community is one of their strengths, I think then using that community to fall back on in times when you do need rest is also really important.
Yeah, I would agree with you, definitely. Gonzalo, did you have any thoughts to add?
Any leaders could go through the ABCs of how to preserve your well-being and be better at self-care and seek support when you are at that position of need, setting boundaries, even time management. I think that those are good to have, maybe must to have, when a leader is part of a minority and a group that in some occasions doesn't have it that easy. I will be blunt. This might not sound like the perfect answer for this question, but for your own well-being, this community has always needed resilience and power and mucha fuerza. And when everything fails and when nothing is enough to have a good well-being, again, get together with the community. It brings a very special care.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that. I appreciate that answer. It's straight and to the heart. Truth, right? Truth. Now, Amy, we have a specific question for you. Are you up for it? Awesome. Now, how has your sense of identity, how's it been expanded living and working in Mexico?
Oh, that's a big question. I don't know if we have time for it. I think growing up, I just really lived in the mainstream culture. It was my cultural context. And so that's what I knew. After university, I moved to Europe and I lived in the Czech Republic for a year. And that was such an eye-opening experience, living in a culture that was really very different in terms of being open and accepting of people. I found it really difficult to kind of break into the culture. And then after leaving there, I came to Mexico. And so I've been here for 11 years now. And I think, one, I just had a lot of assumptions. In my mind, I grew up with what I saw of Mexico on TV. And you always hear about los narcos and like the cartel and the danger and people with sombreros walking around with their donkey. And, these assumptions of things that you experience from the media. That was really my context moving to Mexico. I didn't speak Spanish. I had met some people in my life before that were Mexican, but I hadn't really experienced the culture. And so I think that culture is so vast. And so moving here, it just really surprised me in a wonderful way, just how different the culture is than the way it's frequently represented or presented in the media. And I think it's something that you never stop, or I never will stop learning from. When I moved here and 3 years later, I started dating my husband. And when we started dating, I thought, I speak Spanish, I know Mexican culture, I fit in here, I know everything, it's great. And then we started dating and we got married, and I thought, oh my gosh, I don't know anything. This is all new. Although maybe that's partially just what marriage is. But there were so many things that he would say things, and I was like, what are you saying? We speak Spanish together, and so frequently there are things that he's saying that I still don't understand, or I still don't know what he's talking about. We still have culture shock and these choques with one another that we realize, oh, this is really just an assumption coming from our cultural context that we're running into. And so I think knowing that when you're experiencing another culture, these assumptions that you have going into it are very likely not real. They're not all based on fact, and really being open to the idea that it's going to change. and that the culture is going to change you. And I think another important aspect is knowing that no culture is better than another. I grew up in one culture. I live my life in a very different culture. And that doesn't mean that one is superior to the other. They're different, and there are beautiful things in each culture. There are positives, and there are things that each culture could continue to grow in. And so it's about identifying the beauty in each culture and accepting those pieces, but not preferring one over the other, or feeling like one is superior in any way. So I think that's my short answer that's probably already gone on too long.
No, Amy, that's powerful, really, and kind of it's a perfect segue to one of the questions that was asked by one of our dedicated attendees in the audience. They asked what's something that managers, leaders who are not part of this community often get wrong, or they don't get it right. So, in other words, what are common pitfalls of the well-intentioned leader who wants to be inclusive but really doesn't know how? Like, they fall into that trap you talked about of the stereotypes. They don't really mean to insult anybody. Can you guys help out with that? Maybe add some comments to that and let folks know. I'd love if we could all stay on camera for this so we could kind of share amongst each other. What are you thinking when you hear this? Liz, did you want to follow up with it, or maybe toss it to Amy to add a point, or what do you want to do?
I think I can say something related to what Amy said about challenging your own assumptions. So I think leaders, it's important for leaders to kind of ask themselves, like, what assumptions am I making? For example, one assumption that's often made of our community is that we all speak Spanish, and that's not necessarily true. And I know I've talked to some people who grew up in the United States and immigrated as a child from Mexico with their families, and they were specifically not taught Spanish because if you spoke Spanish, you were othered, you were treated differently at school, and so that's part of the wanting to assimilate. And so not everybody speaks Spanish, and to that end, also not everybody speaks business level Spanish that can work for like translation, for example. So for example, I grew up in Mexico, but I went to an American school, and most of my education was in English. So my business Spanish is not very good. I do help with translation sometimes, but I'm definitely not a professional at all. So just kind of thinking what assumptions you have and being willing to challenge your own assumptions.
I love that. Yeah, that's really good, especially as you speak to my mom and my abuelita would argue about my level of fluency, right? But when my parents came here, it was that household of no, we're not speaking Spanish. That was my father's thing. So we didn't. So what I learned from listening and sneaking into conversations. Y ahora puede conversar. I can speak a conversational Spanish, but everybody's not at the same level. Do you deny your heritage because of that? No, you don't, right? So, Gonzalo, what do you say about that?
Definitely. The reality you describe in the Americas is different to anything that I have experienced as a kid. But later in my life, now after 10 years in Germany and more in Belgium, and I have lived to Portugal, there are some stereotypes that I saw how somehow we have to fight double, triple to prove them wrong, and sometimes in numerous occasions, those stereotypes will stay. That is very, very frustrating. I would say to leaders to challenging their stereotypes, of course, to be objective, to measure and compare different communities' behaviors, and one in the end probably realizes that we are all of us much more alike than we think. But also, I would say value and highlight those special things that could be found in the community, in different communities. And last, I would say create opportunities for that exposure, and create, if you are yourself a Latino, try to find yourself those spaces to create your own opportunities, and if you're a leader, try to help that way.
Yeah. Amy, that's awesome, Gonzalo. Thank you for that. Thank you. Amy, is there anything that you wanted to add to that?
I think they hit the nail on the head with that one. I would just say, when challenging your assumptions, being really open to listening, as opposed to bringing your assumption. Just sit back and give the other person the opportunity to speak and share openly in a very safe space. And then when you listen, being ready to change. Because even if you listen and if you don't take in what they're saying, what was the point of the conversation? So giving them the space to speak freely, and it could be totally different than any of the stereotypes you have in your mind, and being very willing to give up that stereotype.
Yeah, that's key. I think that you all touched on that. As a leader, you have to provide a safe space for your people to unmask, so to speak, to unveil your approachability, your authenticity. Gives them that space, but you can't force that. As a leader, you need to allow them to decide when they will remove the veil and share those pieces of themselves with you. That's not part of the thing that you manage in their world. And when that veil comes down, as a leader, you've gained their respect. And then that's another level of the relationship that you'll have with them. That authenticity is so key to getting everything going. So I think we are absolutely out of time for today. Yeah, we've had a ball. I just looked at the time. I'm like, oh my goodness. Thank you all for this discussion. Thank you for this conversation. We want to keep these conversations going beyond the Heritage Month, right? Hispanic Heritage Month is not the only time that we should be talking about these things. So we're going to this is just the first in a series. Can you believe it? We're getting fancy. We're going to have a series. It's going to be awesome. So we need you to keep an eye out. We're going to communicate to you when that's coming. But in addition to the session today, our group's also put together 2 other resources for you. I want to go ahead and share that with you now. I had hinted about it earlier. We have a specialty curated playlist called Unidos y Diversos, right? Featuring popular Hispanic and Latinx musical stars. That's our theme, actually, for this month. I forgot to mention that earlier. So that's going to be placed in the chat for you. And it's amazing. You'll be dancing through the day, probably into next week. It was put together by our ERG group, and one of our co-leads, Marsha Dawkins, is the lead of putting this all together. Shout out to Marsha. So thank you. We also created a resource map, and that's highlighting Hispanic and Latinx owned small businesses, creators, and community organizations shared by members of our ERG. So definitely plug into that. And again, we'll put the link in the chat for you. Some of you asked about our research. And as you know, at the Center for Creative Leadership, we talk research. That's what we do, right? So we have a research blog post highlighting the impact of the Latin Success Leadership Program that's developed in partnership between CCL and MANA de San Diego. Okay, so again, another link for you. Please take advantage of these resources. We put a little bit of effort behind it because this is so important to us. It's bigger than just our ERG. You know, we want to make an impact to the community. So before you all go, I need you to do something for us, not just for me, but for all of us. I want you to share this conversation with your networks, because something that might have been shared today, something in the chat, might be exactly what somebody else in our community needs to hear. okay, and the resources they need to have access to. So I want to say thank you all for tuning in, okay? And what else? Just thank my panelists. Aren't they great? They are absolutely awesome. Yes, I'm getting some agreement in the chat. Thank you all. You're incredible. Thank you for joining us and being a part of this. And we'll see you at the next event, right? We'll see you at the next series. We'll be sure to give you some notice. Take care. Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Thank you.